Fantastic. So welcome to 1 Million Cups. Lots of familiar faces, some not. So I'll say this again, as I always do. 1 Million Cups is a Kauffman Foundation initiative, so they make all this possible. The idea is that we share 1 million cups with entrepreneurs in our community and grow our local economy through entrepreneurship. Today, I say this every week, but today is a special one because the journey is a little bit different than some of the journeys that we've had in the past. A lot of the times, you think about these startups and it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna invent this and make this and people give you lots of money for it and there's no failure that gets told in that story. But failure is such a real part of success. It's almost more of a part of success than some good stories are. So today we're gonna hear from a seasoned entrepreneur that's had the ups and downs, but has prevailed, come out on top like Rocky. And his story is just really interesting. So I'm excited to hear it, full-throated, the full journey. Heard a little bit of it, but without any further ado, Dave Wingle.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Good to be here. I've got Andy Griebel here, who's the CTO of iDatafy. So Andy answers all the hard questions, or at least keeps me honest. The goal for today, we're not going to get too much in the deep weeds about iDatafy, but just trying to put myself in the shoes of other entrepreneurs, of picking up just little tips, or even just experiences so that you can commiserate that you're not alone, so that you can see that it's, success isn't always a linear path upwards. So what I want to do was just give a little bit of background before we get into what iDatafy does, into how we got here with iDatafy. So 4 key areas. Go to background. We're going to go over this quote, iDatafy. And then, again, I don't want to focus too much on the failure aspect, but it's really tempered a lot of how we've gotten here is by learning from our mistakes and persevering and building something great. So just frame of reference about me. I've been in the data industry for 15 years or so. And when I say data, I don't mean, selling files, more information services where we help companies solve problems with the use of data. You could call it big data, you could call it whatever you want, but we build systems to help answer questions in real time. So I was with a company up in Northern Virginia called Targus Info. I was laughing and showing Andy, we're not the bad company. We weren't the laser pointer Targus company. Targus Info got its start in 1992, and it was supposed to be targeted information. So when I was there, I had the good fortune of building a team, and we built the first lead verification service. So what is that? So if you think of LendingTree, their business model is getting people to put in just their name, address, phone, and email, and then they make it, they make their value proposition as it's a good thing for the consumer to do that because you're going to get multiple offers, right? What they're really doing is they're selling that information for about $50 to $60 a pop to 3 or 4 different banks, hence the competition. But they were having a huge challenge in that they were getting not just simple bogus stuff like Mickey Mouse, but they're getting disconnected phone numbers. They were getting, emails that were bouncing, and they didn't have a solution for it. And as you can imagine, if you're a lender and you're paying $70 for Andy Griebel at that phone number, and you paid your money and you called it and it's disconnected, you're furious. And then you multiply that times 10,000, multiples. It was a serious issue. At the time, from around 2005 when I started the group, we were just right place, right time, right solution. No other companies were looking at it. We thought, I remember thinking at the time even that Axiom would be coming and crush us. We were unique in that we were so small and the industry was so nascent that it wasn't on anybody's radar. And over the course of 4 years, we grew the team to $10 million a year in revenue, all recurring revenue. So LendingTree would pay Targus 10 cents a transaction. We would give back a response that, yes, you can call that lead, or no, you can't. And we ended up getting hundreds of customers. It was a great business, in that it was over 50% margins. Even better is we only had about 10 dedicated employees. So the story, it sounds like it's great. It was in the end. My division ended up accounting for about 19% of the total revenues. About a year and a half after I left, the company was sold for $650 million to Neustar. They're now folded into Neustar and doing quite well. But as I said, before I hit it big at Targets Info, there was a lot of failure. I'm going to go over some of these points because I think, when you see, I haven't met any entrepreneurs that haven't failed. And one of the biggest red flags to me when, whether it's interviews for jobs or other things, I ask people about their failures, because if they can't cite a failure that they've had, it's a huge red flag. I mean, it means that they haven't gone for it. It means that they're not willing to admit that they've done something that didn't work out. And so for me, it's a part of how I got to Targets and how Andy and I have persevered with iDatafy. So, whoops, these are very brief slides, so don't worry, it's not death by PowerPoint. Went to grad school. I worked for Morgan Stanley in New York City. I thought I wanted to be in banking. Got a master's degree in finance, all that. This is not a lie. I was fired from Morgan Stanley on December 24th, 1998. So I was actually fired on Christmas Eve. And I do have the paperwork to prove it. What makes this actually even more painful was at the time, back when I was still young and had brown hair, I just met this girl down in Virginia. And I was kind of a little full of myself. Yeah, I live up in Manhattan. Work for Morgan Stanley. I'll fly down and let's go on a date. And she's like, okay, that sounds good. So that was a week before I got fired. I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but you'll see where this is going. So go down for the date with her. And she's like, I'm glad you could fly down. I was like, well, some things have happened since we met, a week or so ago. And she's like, what? And I'm like, well, I was like, I kind of got fired. And she's like, you got fired? And she's like, so you didn't fly down? I was like, no, I took the Peter Pan bus down here to Virginia to go on this date for you. And we started talking. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? She's like, are you going to take unemployment? And I said, no, I really my beliefs, I just think that unemployment's really critical as a support system, to help those that are really need it. And I just felt like I needed to go out there immediately and start looking for something else. And she just looked at me like, wow. It's like, I feel the same exact way. And obviously it's not the only thing, but it was a life thing where if I hadn't have gotten fired in New York, I ended up having a job offer from Goldman Sachs in New York or a bank down in DC. I decided to go down to DC because she was there and the job was there and life's history. So, at the time, getting fired on Christmas Eve was just about the worst thing that had ever happened to me. But it turned out to be, a blessing in disguise. So from there, and I'm not going to focus too much, I'm going to go through this quickly on the failure, worked for this investment banking firm, and I was getting a step closer to where I wanted to be. This is about 99, 98, and this is the big tech boom. I was actually assigned to cover banks and thrifts, which I thought was the least interesting thing of all time, when all my other friends on the trading desks are covering, web methods, MicroStrategy, all these other companies in DC that were hot at the time. And I was stuck just covering these banks and thrifts that I just could not get excited about. And I just didn't love my job. At the end of the day, having my success tied to how well the trades were timed or, how the market was doing, it wasn't for me. But what I did find fascinating was seeing all the road shows of the entrepreneurs coming through our investment bank and telling their story. And that's when I knew. I mean, that was it. I didn't want to be in finance. I wanted to be the guy that's part of a team that goes out and builds something. And it wasn't even the fact that in the bubble that they were exploding and doing great. It was just watching how they built something from nothing. So then that's pulling back up to the first slide. When I joined Targets, and I'm focusing on this because it gets into specifically why we decided to start iDatafy as a bootstrap company, not looking for funding. But when I joined Targets in 2001, they'd been around for about 10 years. The company was a data company. It was bootstrapped. It took them about 10 years to get to $15 million in revenue. So when I joined, there was 30 employees, 15 million in revenue. Again, our last bit of failure, and then I'll focus on some good stuff. But I dealt with failure, and then I had it again. I was new to solution sales. I'm not sure how many people here have dealt with that. Extremely long sales cycles. I mean, this isn't just call up and get an order. This is a year-long, solution selling, understanding pain points, and going from there. I literally set the company record for the longest tenure of not selling anything, but still keeping a job. I went, I think, 18 months which is unheard of. And if you're, for anyone, guys or girls in here that have done solution selling, you're usually fired after about month 6, where it's just, it's clear the person isn't working out. But I was going at it, I had, the faith of my superiors, and eventually it clicked. We found the right market at the right time. I hired the right people, and then it just exploded. So when I joined the company, it was about 15 million. After 8 years, when I had left, I played really only a small role in the company succeeding. The company was at $125 million a year, all recurring revenue. So I was able to see firsthand how a couple of entrepreneurs could build a company without taking any money. It wasn't until about year 15 where they took a $60 million investment from TA Associates, which is a big private equity firm. And then our CEO, instead of paying himself, he paid it all out to shareholders, and the shareholders were the employees. So it was pretty unheard of to take a private equity investment and then distribute it to the employees. But it was just a great culture that they had, and endeared loyalty. And it showed me that it can take a while, but you can build a great company that's what we call, customer funded. So I'm going to make the jump. So when I was there, even when it's great, you still think, oh, well, I'm not getting what I should. I'm doing all this and I'm only getting that. But at the end of the day, when I started thinking about what I wanted to do next, this is the last one. So this kind of mediocre Tom Cruise movie, and sounds kind of obscure, I know, but there was this line they kept on saying where they said, action is inevitable. There will be consequences. And I just started thinking about it. And I had always, just like a lot of other kind of entrepreneurs, just said, oh, I should do this, but I just couldn't make the leap. And it really got me thinking about getting that mindset of, just, it's going to happen. Like, you have to do this. And, if you get that mindset and you then do something, something's going to happen. And the worst is seeing, folks, could be employees, it could be partners, it could be others that are just paralyzed and don't do anything. And if you don't do anything, you're not going to get any different result. So to me, that's really something to keep in mind that I remind myself, is that it's okay and you have to push yourself to take risks. And the exciting part is something's going to happen. You hope for a good outcome. It could be a very bad outcome, but it's going to be different. And that leads to iDatafy. And so what Andy and I built, and Andy's been there since day one, is we didn't break out of a new industries. I really discourage people from trying to start up a startup or company in an industry outside of their knowledge base. We focused on how could we improve upon what my great team built at Targus. So if you remember, that service was just, hey, can you reach Andy at that phone number, lending tree, right? And eventually got into some other things. But what was happening was the fraudsters were figuring out that they could literally just copy phone books, and that would get past the Targus system, right? So it was, yeah, you can reach Andy at that phone number. So the default was thinking that he'd be a good lead. Well, it didn't take long for the fraudsters to figure it out. Hey, I can put in this data that will get past the system, and then we'll still get paid, and the client will get ripped off. But this is big money. I mean, these companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of the largest online advertisers are lead generators, whether it be lenders, for-profit schools, more household names that you've probably heard of, like AutoItel, LendingTree, the others. And so we they fascinated in how consortiums have been built in other industries to fight fraud. So if you think about the auto industry, they have a claims database that was originally set up by ChoicePoint called Clue. So all the big auto insurers, State Farm, Allstate, Geico, Progressive, they all compete against each other, but they all share data when it comes to claims. So if they get a claim, they put it into this consortium database to say, I got a claim from Andy. Andy is just the resident bad guy for the next couple minutes on examples here. And then if he files another claim with another new insurer, that person puts it in. So eventually it becomes obvious when he's filed multiple claims that there's something wrong. So we thought, what if we built a proprietary database literally of bad leads? And it doesn't sound exciting, but it had never been done before. So literally we are asking, let's say, for-profit schools like the University of Phoenix, DeVry, Strayer, those types of schools, give us the data you don't care about anymore. So give us the leads that you already bought, and they said they weren't interested. They told you they just wanted a free iPod. They never picked up the phone. Give us that data, and then we're going to collect that same data from a lot of other schools. We're going to put it all together, and then before you pay $100 for your next, Lee Watson, you're going to look at our database for a fee to see if other schools have already said it's a bad lead. And so all that makes sense. There's one big challenge, and that gets into until you have enough data, it's worthless. So we started, the stars aligned for me where Targus was sold. I got a very small amount of equity, but I believe in the idea. So we have never taken an outside dime of investment. That's not saying that we won't. But again, from my background, I saw how my previous bosses could build the company over time, and then eventually they did take an outside investment when the time was right. But we knew that there was a problem. In sales, we always look at kind of authority, money, need, urgency. We were talking to multiple different institutions that, they all had the same pain point. They were all willing to pay, and there was a lot of urgency. And so we went about, and over the course of the last 3.5 years, we've built a proprietary database of over 35 million records that no one else has. So a big difference in what we've done at iDatafy versus at Targus. Within 6 months of us being successful at that company, there were 6 companies all saying, hey, we can verify leads, right? We can say that this person's there based on other data. But the difference with what we've done is nobody else has spent the time of collecting the data that we have. So nobody else can check a lead, for example, and say that it has been reported bad because this data isn't publicly available. So we built a great moat around our business, and that we've spent the time when others haven't, and filed the patents and all the other stuff to be able to build the strongest database to identify this type of fraud. I'm going to clip through some of this kind of quickly here. Before I get into kind of the other part of the business, I really want to focus, and I'll open up to Andy too, but what we found that's been huge for our own lead generation is content. Our own white papers, you see this across multiple industries. So whatever you can do to provide valuable information to someone, that's a great conversation starter. And it also conveys that you're a subject matter expert. So this is just a screenshot of our website. We're focused on 2 industries, or sort of 2 products, so to speak, right now, sets. We've got our bad lead database, and then we also have our other solution, which is focused on financial aid fraud detection, which I'll get into in a minute. But we've been able to use our proprietary data to generate research that's been valuable for our clients that they then share, that shows just how much of a problem is out there in these 2 unique fields, and why it's important to bring in iDatafy. So, looking at, I think even seeing outside, there's, Barbara Corcoran, who's on Shark Tank. She even talked about this when she was just starting in real estate. She started up the Corcoran real estate, not even a blog yet, but research report in New York, where she would hand out, to the New York Post, hey, here are the top 5 listings right now. And it started getting her mentioned. And so I think whatever industry you're in, whatever you can do to create proprietary content with your brand on it is huge. Right now, actually, if you don't mind passing this around, I'll show this. I'll get into our next, what Andy and I are focused on right now, in addition to building out the bad lead database. But when we were talking, get to that in a second. When we were talking with a lot of our school partners, they said, you need to take this concept of this bad lead database, and you need to help us with our straw students. And I was like, what's a straw student? And it's financial aid frauds. There are literally criminal aid fraud rings that will go around at open enrollment schools, and they will enroll someone to get a Pell Grant, which is not repayable, or even a loan. And as soon as they get the disbursement, that person will disappear and then re-enroll somewhere else. There are very few government systems in place to be able to successfully track this. There is very weak reporting today among schools to give the government the data that they need, but there's a huge pain point. So every year, billions of dollars are lost to these fraud rings. So that money is out of the hands of deserving students and into the pockets of criminals. And we figured out the common denominators that the criminals use to be able to flag them. So same concept again, where in this case, instead of leads, schools are giving us their dropouts, and then we're aggregating that together, and then we're letting them check their new applicants against that different database of fraud. So our goal is to be laser focused on building these databases and then also providing professional services around being able to identify fraud that you can't identify from a credit report, you can't identify from any other service that's out there. And a couple of examples are, one is our report on the Curious case, and I'll pass this around. You can look at this if you wanted. This is a heat map where we've literally mapped all the known cases of financial aid fraud that we've seen across the US. And then more specifically, we found that it's heightened in the Southeast. But with Curious Case Tally Trace, so on our first product, the bad lead database, we found fraud, bad leads that schools didn't even know were bad. So in each case, a school or a partner will report to us their bad data. In some cases, they didn't realize how bad it was. So this one email address, and please do not email her because she is not a nice person down in New Orleans. This one person had been reported bad hundreds of times to us. Most people didn't realize she was bad because she was just a duplicate. So they weren't buying her because she'd already been submitted. We had looked across all the vendors that have sold it, and it wasn't just one vendor. 45 different vendors had sold this same lead. So what we came to was that there's a rogue, kind of what they call an affiliate, that was supplying this person, and she's literally been getting paid to answer the phone and pretend to be an interested lead. So remember, these leads are being sold for $40 to $100 a piece. You could carve out $5 of that to someone, and all they do is just answer the phone all day and say, yes, I'm interested. Yes, I'm interested. And this isn't an isolated case. The other one we have on there, Santa Dan, which was Andy's favorite. I mean, this guy had 27 different email aliases. In our white paper, which is free on our website, we actually took a screenshot of the CRM log of one of our biggest customers, and they showed themselves 5 years, talking to the person. He says, oh, I'm interested in going to school. 2 weeks later, they call him, oh, I'm in the hospital, call me back. 3 weeks later, yep, I'm interested in going to school. Then the next log is, oh, my computer's down. I mean, 5 years. And it's just crazy. And so these people have been out there just gaming the system because it's been easy to game prior to iDatafy. But now that we've got our bad lead database, before someone pays $100 for Tally Trace, we can show that she's actually got these different aliases. This is kind of small, but this gives you an idea. She's not just Tally Trace at Yahoo. She's Tally Trade at Yahoo. She's Tally Trice at Yahoo. She's Yally Trace. She's Pally Prace. She's Sally Trace. She's Tally Tark. It's crazy. So this is it. I mean, this was our aha moment about a year and a half ago, Andy, 2 years ago. I mean, this is when we got enough data where all of a sudden it was crazy.
Yeah, it may not be clear how much money these people are getting from the schools.
Hey, Andy,
Yeah.
say that again in the mic.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, it may not. Hello?
Yeah.
Hey, it may not be clear how much money a student, one instance of Tally Trace is actually getting. I mean, we kind of talked about it from the lead perspective, but how much that is.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard to say because we would estimate that someone like a fraudster. So if we can put this person in that ring, if they've been doing this for 5 years and they're talking to 100 schools and they use the same identity at least 4 times a year because they can sell it usually about 4 times a year outside the dupe windows, and then they're using 25 aliases. I mean, we think that some of these fraudsters have made hundreds of thousands of dollars from doing nothing more than just answering the phone because they've done it for so long and there's so much money. So remember, every phone call, that lead that's been accepted is $50 to $100. So if you estimate even a small amount of that going of $5, I mean, you're talking about thousands of phone calls that are going to a person over the course of a year or two. And then this is just one person. This is one person with at a minimum 30 identities. I mean, multiply. I mean, it just gets crazy. And then you look at the amount of money spent. Until recently, University of Phoenix, other big schools, they were easily spending over $100 million on online advertising. The vast majority of that goes into lead gen. And so in our mind, lead gen is actually the best customer acquisition method out there for businesses focused on students there. If you're using the right protections. If you're thinking about if you're paying per click, you don't really know what you're getting. If you're paying for an identity, as long as this person's really interested, it's great. But there's also been these huge gaps that have been there, and that's where we come in. So, we are, focused on helping these schools still be able to leverage it and still make the most of it. I'm going to go into student review a little bit more. So this is our second product that I mentioned, our student review, financial aid fraud detection, and then this is what's being passed around right now. So just in the last week, we've published our latest research. So what we've done here is, again, we're working with the top schools in the country. They're giving us the fraud that they've reported to the feds to follow up on. And then all we did here was we just mapped it, and it's exploded. I mean, we've been getting calls for the last 10 or 8 days since we released this from schools that have said, hey, we've got this problem, or we've got this problem, but we haven't been reporting this data. We're the first private company to have actually assembled compliant data to show how much of a problem this is. Over the last 4 years, the Office of the Inspector General has made it very clear that this is a problem, but the consensus is that the department itself has failed to follow up. I think one good example is the University of Phoenix, who works with us on hot address. They've reported over 13,000 tips, and there's only been 30 indictments. So think about that. I mean, 13,000 tips, 30 indictments. They alone feel that they've stopped over $150 million in fraud. And it's very clear that the Department of Education has failed to successfully safeguard taxpayer money. So they're not looking at these tips. They are in the way that they should. They're in need of expertise. And that's where we're coming in, where we have a plan. And in the white paper, we focus on not only showing what's wrong, but showing here's how you fix it. And I won't go into all that now. I want to open up for questions, but our goal is to make sure that people understand that this is a billion-dollar problem. And oh, by the way, here's part of our plan on how to fix it. Andy, why don't you just go over a couple minutes just for the folks that are interested from an architecture side, just how our databases are set up regardless of whether it's lead review or student review. Just walk through kind of the systemic architecture that we use.
Well, it's pretty straight ahead. We define a format of what we want the data to look like, and the different vendor codes that we assign. There's a finite number of people that are in this business of generating leads that sell them to a school or to LendingTree or somebody else like that. And we say, when you send us this one, assign this number to it so we know who it is. And then we stick it all into essentially it's a Chinese wall. You can know that somebody was reported bad a dozen times by a dozen different vendors, but you don't know who those vendors are. Participatory database, if some of you guys were around from a marketing standpoint back in the days when there was a company called Abacus that became a little company called DoubleClick, which you may have heard of. Anyway, it's very similar to what they did with retail back years and years ago, a contributory database. From the access standpoint, they either talk to us via an API, application programming interface, that imagine you're an operator, CRM operator. They can in real time say, this is the next number that's up for me to call. Do I call it or not? And we just return back a score code. And they either skip over to the guy or they give them a call depending. And then if they want, they can send it to us in a batch and just get more or less an Excel spreadsheet data back of all the results.
Yep. And the way that Andy's, he sells himself short. So this isn't just a batch world. These people are expecting response in sub-second time. So the system that Andy's built allows for an entity to send us a phone number and an email, and in sub-second time, even if it's been reported bad 100 times, we return back, hey, this one's bad, here's how many times it's been reported bad, here's the date it was bad, and here are all the different reasons. And to be able to deliver that in sub-second time is huge, because it doesn't matter how much data that we have. If we can't quickly tell them that they should pass on this lead, they're going to contractually have to buy it, and then we're worthless. So Andy's done just a phenomenal job of building an architecture where we don't need to hire a bunch of people. Andy's built the machines to do the heavy lifting for us. The challenge for us is to find and convey our value proposition. But we love doing that. And so last slide, what we're really focused on now is providing additional valuable services that account for our knowledge base and focusing on areas for 3-4 years, in some cases 15 years on the data side. So our goal is to build a $10 million company. And I try to set up, obviously we like to be bigger than that, but I look at it as what have I successfully been able to do in the past? with a lot of help from others. So at Targus, we were able to build that team to 10 million, and then it continued to grow from there. That's our goal with iDatafy. We've been able to double revenues each of the 4 years since we've got started. Obviously, that's easy when you're starting at zero. And that's our goal for the next 3 years, is to continue to double it, and to be able to provide additional services beyond just data to complement that. So be able to ingrain the data, but tell a story and be able to help customers actually act on it. So I've already gone over this. Worst failures turned out to be the greatest blessings. I think everyone here has had their own examples. Failure runs in my family. That's the last thing I'll say. So my father-in-law has been called a 3-time loser publicly. He ran for the U.S. Senate and lost in '86. He ran for Attorney General in 1990 and he lost. He ran for governor and lost. And then last year, year before, he ran for governor and he won. So it's not just business. I mean, politics is anything. I mean, people, anyone that's saying that person's a loser, I'll show you someone that's not an entrepreneur because they haven't done anything or gone for it. So I convey to my kids the importance of the Teddy Roosevelt man in the arena, just the importance of going for it. And I think, the quintessential line of fortune favors the bold is it. If you go for it, odds are sooner or later the right time is going to be the right place. And then lastly, just the importance of being a subject matter expert to get you to the next level and finding something that you love. So I think that's it. Are there any questions or comments, insults? I'll take any of it. Lee.
This wasn't an investor pitch, so I'm
Yeah.
not going to critique it that way.
Yeah.
No, so here's my question.
Yeah.
You wanted Andy to talk about the architecture. So are you guys doing any machine learning, quote, big data kind of work? Could you elaborate on that? And then I have another question after.
Sure.
Yes.
That's the joy of being a private company, Lee.
I understand. So then the second thing is if you're learning how the behaviors of the fraud people act, can you predict an email address, a user being fraudulent before it gets to the place where your example has 100,000,
Let me take that first part, Andy, and then get into it. So on the bad lead database, we actually pride ourselves right now in saying that we don't model anything. So we actually take it from a contrarian side because there's been a lot of angst around what we call lead scoring to predict whether, hey, Andy's going to enroll, but Jessica's not. And a lot of times people use that as a default of quality. And when Jessica does enroll, that gets into, well, you're wrong. So we've prided ourselves in actually building data of it's just fact. It's either there or it's not. So either Andy's been reported as a bad lead or he hasn't. And what we show is we will have, for example, a school, the way that they test out our value is they'll send us 2 files. They'll send us a file of all their leads, and then they'll send us a smaller file of the students that started, right? What we show is that the leads that started have next to no instances of iDatafy bad data on them. So we're not modeling anything. We're just showing them, hey, it's a fact. If someone hasn't complained, odds are they're going to enroll better than that. We haven't gone to the point of then modeling that data because we haven't had to, and it's a stronger value prop. Now, on the financial aid fraud detection, what we do see is, in the paper we talk about it, there's a town in Georgia called Albany, Georgia, and we have over 800 reports of Albany, Georgia, being sent to the feds. There's something seriously wrong in Albany, Georgia. The last map on there that he's got right there, if you hold it up, that one town, those are all pins of fraud that's been reported in there. If I'm the University of Phoenix and I know that there's an exponential disproportion of fraud being reported in that town over this town, then yes, I will use that to model. And so we're starting to work with especially schools on that side to build sort of red flag models around areas that have a much higher propensity of fraud than others. You have anything to add, Andy?
No, Andy's no comment.
Okay.
So, all right, my second question, Andy, you've been around and worked in lots of entrepreneurial ventures over the last couple decades. Dave, you're relatively new back to the state. So I'm curious what your perspectives are on this whole entrepreneurial ecosystem, what you think is awesome, what do you think we need to work on, just kind of some feedback and comments.
Well, I think the environment, like this place, has been good for both Dave and I. Otherwise we work out of our house or wherever else, we cram in, and it's been good to see the movement, if you want to call it that. Nobody looks at you like you're crazy now, which they used to. I mean, I was at Axiom for several years, and I'm a little bit of an exception because I never had a quote unquote real job until I finally went to work at Axiom. And then after that, I end up back, I'm just dying to get back into doing my own thing because I've done it for so long before. And making that transition was not all that easy. It's taken several years. And we're an overnight 4-year success.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And you just have to beat your head. I mean, I'm involved in this and some other things. And I was telling Dave, it's like all my projects went to college and they're graduating, And so to just plan on that, if you're getting into it, just know that everybody will tell you it takes a lot more money and it takes a lot more time than you think it's going to. And with rare exceptions, that's how it's been turning out for us and me.
Yeah. I mean, if I didn't have that failure earlier, and if I didn't see what my CEOs could have done or then I got, there's no way I think I would have gotten past year 1 with iDatafy. But we did, and we got through it, and now it's great. We're chasing the glory. To your question, Lee, I think that a place like Tech Park Venture Center is terrific because I think not just for entrepreneurs, but people that are thinking about making the leap, they can see that there's a home for them. And I think that's, for a lot of people, that's scary, is to think about, it's like, just how do I get from right here to right there, where now, I'm on my own and going. And so I think physically the importance of having a space is great. And then from our state perspective, certainly, we have to do a better job of building a talent pool for people to start companies here, for companies to come in. It's a huge part of what we're doing in the computer science stuff. So iDatafy is the all-encompassing day job, but I was the informal policy advisor, my father-in-law on the computer science, because to me, I mean, that's the home run. Like, that's the thing to swing for, where that could change our state, not next year, not 2 years from now, but 10 years from now, making the investment now to then build that pool of people that can either start their own companies or just be self-sufficient here, is something exciting to go after. So I think we have to go for it on that front and to build awareness. And I think just last week, the Hill up in the Congress, the paper covering the Hill, cited what we're doing as computer science as the #1 idea in the entire country to come out of a state, which is great, but there's still so much more to be done. So I think we really have an opportunity as a state to surpass expectations, and we need to catch up with other states and to set ourselves up. So I think that with the education, that will lead to a better pool and then exponentially more opportunities. Any other questions?
Yeah, for either of you guys, probably Dave, you're the sales guy more than anything. I'm Joe Kaplan, by the way. What, in your opinion, was the greatest contributing factor for getting that first customer traction, that opening up that first revenue stream?
So I was fortunate in that for the first product, I had known many of these people, and they knew my track record of starting the targets team. So again, we weren't trying to bite off more than we could chew. We were focused with relationships we already had. We understood that there was a new business problem that wasn't being met, but there were still a lot of challenges. And that, unlike the system I built at the prior company where you could plug it in and it would work, it would tell you, hey, you can't reach Andy because his phone's disconnected. We still had to build it. And so our challenge was, even though we knew everybody, it still took us 12, 16 months to get enough data in before we could charge for it. One of the mistakes out of a lot that we made was, I think we were focused on early on, since we were customer funded, trying to monetize early customers. And so we're trying to convey a value proposition that wasn't there yet. And so we stepped back from that and instead said, okay, forget about us making money. For the next 6 months, all we're doing is we're just going to collect as much bad data as we can. And that was the right call. Because then when we did that, then it was just a slam dunk. Then we could do these one-day data tests, and we could show them that, hey, their average cost per acquisition was $2,500. This lead, these pooled leads that have complained a bunch, that's average cost is $50,000. I mean, so it's just, and it gets into, everybody knows that, you know, just the idea of, would you rather talk to someone who has complained a lot, or would you rather talk to someone that hasn't complained? And so we can play into that side of saying, hey, we're going to highlight these anonymous leads, which ones that have complained a lot, so you steer clear from them, versus which ones haven't. And so it becomes exponentially easier for us to close deals, in many cases 6-figure deals, once we had enough of that data in there. But we started off on the wrong path in terms of trying to get people to put their own skin in the game. The skin in the game ultimately was them giving us the data and then us proving out the value. Does that answer your question?
So two wrongs don't make a right, but 200,000 is a gold mine.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know, we won't say what the exact amount of data is, but we know what the exact amount of data is. And for us too, I mean, we're just getting started. I mean, we've really focused on higher education. You know, we're looking at several other markets that have similar pain points, and we're going after that next. So now that we've learned mistakes, we're going to try to set up, and Andy's already built it. It's very simple to just set up a new industry. So we're trying not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we're definitely, you know, using, you know, we plowed the road with our face, and we're going to remember some of those lessons and continue to scale.
As you've been working in the interest of people buying leads, have you received any backlash from the companies that are selling them? Because it sounds like you're disrupting kind of what they've been doing.
Yes, we have. But also, those companies weren't going to be partners for us anyway. So that was a good thing, because we showed that there was a problem. We do have companies that sell leads that are thrilled with what we're doing, because now they can have an independent third party verify that what they're selling is genuine. And so that's really been the key. That's when I knew, Andy and I, the first trade show we went to, a lot of great feedback. There are 2 companies, one of them I think went up to him and almost accosted Andy at a booth saying, you know, how can you do this? And like, that's when we knew it. It's just like it's like, you know, you're pulling the sheets away from him, and you're just like, I loved it. I mean, he was just furious. He's like, you can't do it. And we're like, yeah, of course we can do it. It's like,
I don't intimidate well.
yeah, I'm glad they went to him instead of me. So yeah, and so now we've got a program that we're starting up where still the majority of folks, and we only let the lead buyers report to us. So there could be some game theory if you think about it. If you're a seller and we let sellers report their bad data, well, then they could do some bad stuff. You know, they could try to pollute the well. They could do a whole lot of stuff. So we only let the buyers report to us, and then we have various checks to make sure that each buyer, without getting into too many details, is reporting the right amount. But then we are letting the sellers pre-check the lead against us. So that's another revenue stream. So, and it's a win-win for the schools, because at the end of the day, they just want a good lead. And they would rather have a seller send them more good stuff to start with to maximize their cap, versus having to reject leads and then they don't reach their caps. So great question. Yes, some people hate us, and we love that.
Any other questions? So we end all 1 Million Cups the same way, by asking you guys, what is one thing we can do for you as a community?
I think it's just great to continue bringing in different companies. You know, we work right around the corner, so we get the chance to come in here and just eavesdrop sometimes when we're not heads down. You know, in my case, with my headphones on. So I think it's just great to continue to bring in the entrepreneurs, and we learn something all the time. Just keep doing what you're doing. We love that the space is here where we are, and I think it's terrific.
Yeah, I'd say much the same thing. I mean, I've been writing databases for far too long. But the most interesting part for me, but for that, which I also get to do without writing some of the databases, is learning about different businesses. I mean, I've done systems for Alcoa I can go on and on and on. And every time I get involved with something, I learn a whole technology in the industry that I don't know anything about. And so I think that's part of what I get out of this. And so do more of it.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we can go ahead and thank them for coming. We will have this again next Wednesday, 9 a.m. at the Venture Center. Do we have any announcements? Steve, do you have any announcements?
Just that the Joel Hackathon is in 2 weeks, 27th and 28th. So we're sold out, but we have a waiting list for teams. So if you're thinking about putting together a team or know somebody who wants to get on Jessica's waiting list,
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.